Long after the heat of the moment, I pull off the highway in rural Portugal and glance at the Bugatti Chiron's center console. As the engine cools and the carbon silicon carbide brake rotors start to dissipate heat, the onboard computer's telemetry reveals some staggering figures. A peak speed of 377 kilometers per hour. Do the math. And that's 234 miles per hour, with the quad-turbocharged W16 squeezing a max of 1,466 horsepower at 6,691 revolutions per minute. Did I just drive a car or fly a plane? The mind-boggling brain shuffle of Bugatti's latest land rocket cannot be understated, even when placed in context against the now-defunct Veyron. In ultimate supersport trim, the Veyron produced a stunning 1,200 metric horsepower. The Chiron's leap to 1,500 ponies required considerable development, testing, and re-engineering. That exhaustive process saw significant challenges, even late in the game. Consider the high-speed testing incident in South Africa. Despite extensive test bench work, real-world driving revealed that the immense exhaust heat was melting the rear bumper and nearly igniting the car. The solution, it turns out, was to add a duct so airflow from the underbody could channel through and diffuse the heat. Number 1500 horsepower problems. For the 500 wealthy souls who will take delivery, the $2,998,000 Chiron is most certainly an emotional purchase. But it's backed by a battery of left-brain thinking aimed at making it a quicker, smoother, more involving car than its famously controversial predecessor. For starters, only 5% of the engine's parts are retained from the Veyron, the bulk of the new parts getting strengthened, lightened, and re-engineered to better cope with the thermal demands of the heightened output. The 4 turbochargers are 68% larger and now work sequentially, so the first set can facilitate a torque plateau between 2,000 and 4,000 revolutions per minute. The larger, second set of turbos extend the flat line to 6,600 revolutions per minute. The 7-speed gearbox manufactured by Ricardo, which is essentially the only dry-sump dual clutch on the production car market, has been strengthened and reinforced to withstand the engine's thumping 1,180 pound-feet of torque. The immense drivetrain is housed by a carbon fiber chassis by Dallara that requires 1,500 hours to build. The Chiron also gains an adaptive chassis that uses 5 drive modes to set ride height, steering effort, damping, and power distribution. New 20 and 21-inch wheels are not only lighter, they run up to 50% cooler thanks to reworked brake caliper ventilation. The new hoops promise considerably longer wear than the Veyron's famously insatiable appetite for front tires, which ran $20,000 a pair unless you were changing them for the 4th time, in which case you'd be set back an additional $34,500 for 2 replacement wheels. From the driver's seat, the initial impression is entirely digestible. A press of the blue, steering wheel-mounted engine button summons all 16 cylinders, and the sound, at least within the cabin, is not as daunting as you might expect. Those on the outside, however, are hit by a deep, hearty bellow from the Chiron's 6 exhaust pipes. Compared to the Veyron, this cockpit has been cleaned up and streamlined, trading numerous analog gauges on the instrument cluster for one big speedometer needle that sweeps all the way to 300 miles per hour, or 500 kilometers per hour, depending on the country it's built for. 3 configurable TFDs offer additional information, including a tachometer, a trip computer, and vehicle settings. Low-speed driving reveals that, well, low-speed driving is all but impossible. That's not because the Chiron isn't tractable or well-behaved, it's actually remarkably controllable and docile at legal speeds. Rather, when you graze the tip of the turbocharger's immense boost, you get an irresistible taste of that aircraft-like power. The torque piles on as the first set of turbos spoon, tempting you to keep burying the pedal as it tugs your head closer to the headrest. The Chiron's interior is an elegantly understated place where the only distraction from the flawless leather is the subtle glint of anodized aluminium, but those finely modulated details fly out the window as the speed accumulates, diverting your attention towards the rapidly approaching road ahead. The transmission downshifts somewhat jerkily at low speeds, which Bugatti chief test driver Loris Bycoxi attributes to my tester's pre-production status, but above parking lot speeds the cog swaps are smooth and quite quick, especially considering the heft of the gearbox's moving parts and the massive amounts of torque they must handle. The Chiron delivers palpably more responsiveness and visceral reward compared to the Veyron, and in handling mode it tackles corners with a taut, glued-down sense of focus. The trick in the bends is to resist the temptation to get back into the throttle too early, which is exactly the same principle you were taught when learning to drive shifter carts, except this time, you're playing with thermonuclear levels of power. The ante is further up because, at least according to Bugatti brass, the Chiron is capable of drifting in handling mode. Yikes! Onto straighter sections of road, the Chiron charges forward motivated by what feels like an endlessly escalating supply of power. Even in manual mode, the transmission will automatically upshift at red line. Considering the tachometer is buried relatively out of sight, it's certainly a good thing to avoid bouncing this very expensive engine off the rev limiter. Perhaps the only thing's more impressive than the face-flattening acceleration, which can launch the car to 62 miles per hour in under 2.5 seconds and onto a top speed of 261 miles per hour, are the brakes. Just lifting off the gas at high speeds will turn the rear spoiler into an air brake, flapping it so high in the air that it completely blocks the view out of the rear window. Stabbing the left-pedaled triggers up to 2 Gs of decelerative force, capable of bringing the Chiron to a full and complete stop from 124 miles per hour in a mere 410 feet. And then there's that speed run, the shockingly brief but immensely intense burst of acceleration that sends my steed hurtling towards the horizon on a seemingly unstoppable tear. Thanks to the automatically lowered ride height and aggressive downforce, the car stays firmly planted on the road. I, predictably, run out of room all too soon and have to punch the brakes, returning to saner speeds. But when I later learn of the 377 km per hour speed, the figure becomes seared into my brain. The Chiron was still pulling hard at that speed, suggesting it has far greater reserves than the published top speed of 420 km per hour, or 261 miles per hour. And in fact, it does. As Bugatti President Wolfgang de Heimer emphasizes, the car is electronically limited to 420 km per hour to save room for a faster variant that will leave this landmark in the dust, which will turn yet another groundbreaker into a late, great legend.